Oh, faithfully delivering value by interpreting great books from around the world. Hey, this is Sally's Book Talk, and I'm your host today, Hong Yang Ding Dang. Today, the book we're interpreting for you is called The Revenge Case of Shi Jianqiao. Its author, Lin Yu Qing, is the director of the China Research Center at Columbia University in the U.S. We Chinese often say that law shouldn't ignore human feelings. But after modernizing, China adopted Western legal systems and judicial ideas. In our eyes, the law seems a bit cold and rigid, too harsh, lacking the warm stories behind cases that deserve care and exploration. Oh, when emotions and law collide, what happens to justice? The Shi Jianqiao Revenge Case we're covering today is a prime example of that clash, and it was a famous, strange case in China right before the anti-Japanese war. This case has two truly astonishing aspects. Wow, the first amazing thing is that the assassination mastermind was actually a woman named Shi Jianqiao, and the target was Sun Chuanfang, a once powerful figure from the Beiyang era. According to recollections from Shi Jianqiao's descendants, she was born in 1905 in Jinan, Shandong. Her original name was Shi Gulan. As the eldest daughter, she got private schooling and started managing the household at age 13. Her father was Shi Kongbin from Tongcheng, Anhui. Oh, because the family was poor. Shi Kongbin and his brothers joined the army young. He served under Wu Chongjing in the Huai army, then entered Yuan Shikai's Beiyang New Army. Before the Xinhai Revolution, he'd already made it to Major General with a Lieutenant General brevet, which is pretty high up. After the Republic of China began, he became a subordinate of warlord Zhang Zhanchang, commanding the Second Army. In 1925, the Fengtian warlord clique was on the rise, aiming to unify China by force. They pushed to the Yangtze River, clashing with Zhili clique general Sun Chuanfang, and Shi Kongbin's troops joined the fight. That October, Shi Kongbin was defeated and captured. By Beiyang custom, warlords killed soldiers but spared generals to avoid revenge and keep future alliances possible. But this time, maybe to intimidate Fengtian's Sun Chuanfang, he broke the norm and ordered Shi Kongbin's head cut off, exposing the body for 3 days at Bengbu Station in Anhui. Soon, Shi's attendants raced to Jinan. The Shi family opened the door to find the attendant crying too hard to speak. The whole family sensed disaster. Learning of her father's death, Shi Jianqiao felt her family was deeply humiliated. After all, father was a high-ranking general. He shouldn't have died so tragically. But it happened, and now two things are before us: dealing with the aftermath and seeking revenge. Regarding the aftermath, the Shi family got a pension from Zhang Zhanchang, moved the whole family to Tianjin, and after settling down, focused on revenge. Shi Jianqiao hoped relatives and friends of the Shi family would step up. After all, many were soldiers from years of connections. She even married one soldier to aid the revenge. But things didn't go as planned. Even Shi Jianqiao's husband refused to act. Time flew to 1935. Father had been gone 10 years, and Shi Jianqiao felt she couldn't wait any longer. So she unbound her feet, practiced shooting, and decided to personally take down the enemy. In autumn 1935, Sun Chuanfang had lost power and became director of Qinchuai Yuan Buddhist Society on South Malu Road, Tianjin. Usually chanting sutras and reciting Buddha's name, staying aloof from worldly affairs. Shi Jianqiao. After learning Sun's new role, Shi Jianqiao scouted the Buddhist Society repeatedly, biding her time for revenge. Finally, on November 13th, 1935, the chance arrived. Disguised as a devotee, she infiltrated the hall and fired 3 shots at Sun Chuanfang before the crowd, ending his life. After the killing, the hall descended into chaos, but Shi Jianqiao stayed eerily calm. She announced to everyone, "Don't be afraid. I'm only avenging my father. I won't harm others or run. Then she handed out mimeographed materials to witnesses, a poem and a declaration stating her unforgettable revenge and readiness to die with him. After that, she walked out and surrendered to the court. The case instantly shocked the nation. Media tracked it daily, fueling massive public debate. Under Republican law, this was textbook murder. Kill someone, pay with your life. Shi Jianqiao killed, so she deserved execution. But what happened next surprised most. That's the second twist of this case. After surrendering, Shi Jianqiao unexpectedly won public sympathy. The law's leniency. Considering her voluntary surrender, Tianjin District Court gave her 10 years in prison. Later appealed to Nanjing's Supreme Court, which reduced her sentence to 7 years, deeming her father's revenge understandable. What's more interesting is that just 2 months after the Supreme Court's final verdict, the Nanjing national government actually issued a special pardon decree for Shi Jianqiao, and she was released just like that. So why was Shi Jianqiao able to escape severe punishment after killing someone? Why did this murder case shock the central government at the time into granting Shi Jianqiao a special pardon? Oh, this is exactly the question this book aims to answer. Author Lin Yuqing combed through vast historical materials and found that Shi Jianqiao escaped severe punishment by skillfully using media to portray herself as a righteous avenger and a family-oriented, elegant, traditional woman, which won public sympathy and influenced the judicial ruling. Finally, public opinion even forced the national government to pardon her. Next, I'll explain this book through 3 aspects. First, how did Shi Jianqiao portray herself as a righteous, avenging heroine? Second, how exactly did the court rule on this case? Third, why did the national government pardon Shi Jianqiao? First, let's look at how Shi Jianqiao portrayed herself as a righteous, avenging heroine. First off, Shi Jianqiao packaged herself as a heroine driven by filial piety to avenge her father. After her arrest, she told a compelling story. In this story, there was a big villain, Sun Chuanfang. In the book, Sun Chuanfang was portrayed as utterly brutal, slaughtering enemies who had already lost their ability to resist. Among them was her father, Shi Jianqiao, whom Sun Chuanfang executed by heading instead of shooting. Sun Chuanfang even displayed Shi Jianqiao's head on a flagpole, violating modern warfare rules, acting like a savage. Since there's a big villain in this story, of course there needs to be a victim. Her father, Shi Jianqiao, who served under Zhang Zongchang, a man with a terrible reputation, notorious for being reckless and not even knowing his own concubines or children. But moreover, he liked to pretend to be cultured by writing doggerel, leaving behind many laughable incidents. Shi Jianqiao, having served such a person, is something that could never be whitewashed. But in Shi Jianqiao's eyes, her father was still a good comrade, loyal to his duty. When stationed in Hezhe, Shandong, Shi Jianqiao spared no effort in setting up factories to shelter refugees. In no time, bandits in Hezhe decreased significantly. Even in 1925, when he was nearly 60, he obeyed orders without hesitation, marched to the front lines, and ultimately became a sacrifice. Moreover, her father's integrity was something Shi Jianqiao remembered for life. During interviews, she specifically mentioned her father, advising the children to be thrifty in managing the household, to cherish things and people, not to harm others for self-gain, and never to bully with power. In short, Shi Jianqiao was a loving father, a good man, absolutely not a bad person. Yet tragedy inevitably struck. After father passed, the Shi family was left with orphans and widows, 6 helpless children, 4 still minors, and the family collapsed due to warlord brutality. Though we don't know exactly how destitute the Shi family was after retreating to Tianjin, but recalling this narrative, how could it not evoke sympathy and pity? It was against this backdrop that our heroine emerged. Shi Jianqiao herself. When the family was on the brink of collapse, as the eldest daughter, she resolutely joined her mother in shouldering the responsibility of raising her siblings. Beyond that, she was determined to avenge her father, seek justice for her family, and fulfill her filial duty. Chinese culture has always had images of heroines and female warriors who have a sense of justice, help the weak, fight against tyranny, and punish evil to promote good. And the way to punish evil and promote good is often not through the law, but through personal retribution, wielding one's own sword to uphold justice. For example, in Republican-era legends, Lu Xinyang, granddaughter of Zhejiang scholar Lu Luliyang, escaped Emperor Yongzheng's massacre of the Lu family. Later, she killed Yongzheng to avenge her family. Another example is from Peking opera, like in Zhen Yi Stabs the Tiger, where the heroine Zhen Yi is a classic case of righteous revenge. Compared to them, Shi Jianqiao, as a female warrior, is naturally no less impressive. Of course, there's nothing wrong with Shi Jianqiao portraying herself this way. But why did the media at the time accept her story wholesale? This brings us to the media environment in Chinese society at that time. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, mass communication technology was highly advanced, the newspaper industry was booming, and many events that were once only digested locally became regional. And due to the development of media, they could quickly transform into national events. For example, in the 30s, the circulation of some major newspapers reached as high as 150,000 copies. Besides newspapers and other written media, the introduction of radios allowed many illiterate people to learn what was happening in the outside world. And these media, in pursuit of sensational effects, were accustomed to using emotional tactics to cater to public demand. For them, the story of Shi Jianqiao personally killing her enemy was absolutely box office gold. And moreover, the mass entertainment industry at that time was booming, with various novels, movies, radio shows, and dramas further fueling the fire, as they all used the Shi Jianqiao case as a blueprint to create many artistic works. With the media's amplification, Shi Jianqiao's persona was solidified. It was precisely because numerous public media portrayed Shi Jianqiao as a heroine that made the public feel it was acceptable for her as a warrior to do things that exceeded social norms and violated the law. But what was even more remarkable was that after Shi Jianqiao surrendered and was imprisoned, her image changed completely. In prison, she fed the media with another side of herself. She was no longer just a vengeful person full of resentment, but became a reasonable, gentle, respectful, and frugal daughter and mother. For example, she wrote a poem titled Thinking of Mother on a Moonlit Night, which was published in the famous Shanghai newspaper, The Times. The gist was that the night was cool as water, and she thought that everyone in the world has parents who should be reunited. But she was now trapped in prison, truly hoping to return home to fulfill her filial duty and let her mother enjoy the joy of family reunion. Additionally, she missed her two sons deeply. Family is the core of Chinese ethics and can resonate most widely. This move was very effective, satisfying the public's curiosity about the assassin herself, and it truly made Shi Jianqiao herself become closer to them. Here, the first question is essentially answered. In summary, Shi Jianqiao became an avenging heroine. First, she intentionally made her experience seem more like a misfortune she encountered. Then, as a heroine who struggled through adversity, coupled with the amplification by the mass media at the time, people believed that Shi Jianqiao's actions aligned with moral principles. Therefore, they felt sympathy for her. Afterward, she also showcased her feminine and family-oriented side, completely winning over the public. So what impact did the public's sympathy have in this case? This is the second key focus discussed in the book. Just 8 days after the case occurred, the Tianjin District Court filed a public prosecution. The prosecution charged Shi Jianqiao with multiple crimes, including intentional possession of firearms and murder. The Tianjin District Court sentenced Shi Jianqiao to 10 years in prison. Later, the Hebei Provincial High Court overturned the Tianjin court's ruling, reducing her sentence from 10 years to 7. The case was appealed all the way to Nanjing's Supreme Court, which also agreed to lenient treatment for Shi Jianqiao. So how did Shi Jianqiao and her legal team influence the judicial outcome? And what were the limits and boundaries of this influence? This can probably be discussed from two aspects. First, although Shi Jianqiao had the moral high ground, she absolutely couldn't escape conviction because of it. During the Republican era, China had already introduced Western judicial systems. There was a set of principles determining guilt based on facts. For example, if someone kills, they must be held accountable for murder, not based on motives, as in Shi Jianqiao's case. Under the Qing dynasty's legal system, her story of a filial daughter avenging her father would have not only gotten her acquitted, but likely earned an honorary memorial arch. But by the Republican era, filial revenge could no longer be grounds for Shi Jianqiao's acquittal. Second, the case itself had no hard-to-determine facts. Therefore, Shi Jianqiao and her legal team could only seek leniency within the murder charge scope. During the trial, the first defense lawyer were Yu Chan and Hu Shuian, prominent North China legal figures, with Yu having served as senior judicial officer. Since 1928, he'd been a Peking University law professor while practicing law. And many Chinese lawyers were his students. Their strategy avoided legal technicalities to deliver morally compelling arguments, hoping the public would empathize with Shi Jianqiao's pain. They argued for reduced sentencing on two grounds: voluntary surrender and filial revenge. These sentencing reduction grounds were rarely accepted in judicial practice at that time. And on November 25th, 1935, the Tianjin District Court formally opened the trial. Over 200 people attended the hearing that day. After over a month of media hype, the public almost all sided with Shi Jianqiao. Even Sun Chuanfang's hired lawyer faced criticism, and the court feared causing trouble. So Sun Chuanfang's son didn't formally enter until the witness questioning session. In court, as the defense, Shi Jianqiao's legal team first cited provisions from the Tang Code, recognizing that voluntary surrender should reduce the sentence. Then they cited the Han Dynasty Confucian classic Gongguang commentary on the spring and autumn annals, arguing that if a father dies unjustly, children should seek revenge. This has moral justification. Although killing shouldn't be encouraged, filial and righteous actions shouldn't be concealed. In this dilemma, the court needs to weigh things carefully. If they sentence Shi Jianqiao harshly, it will surely undermine moral justice and bring negative impacts to society. The media ate this up. Compared to tedious legal jargon, moral judgments are more direct and satisfying. They greatly admired the defense team's arguments, reporting extensively every day, with many headlines using phrases like "reduced sentence is understandable" and "sympathy." As headlines, besides the legal team, there's of course the heroine of this big drama, Shi Jianqiao. In court, as the defendant, her main strategy was to evoke public sympathy and rely on the lawyer's rigor. On the contrary, Shi Jianqiao could express her emotions freely, so each of her court appearances was filled with dramatic moments, creating several dramatic climaxes. For example, when the plaintiff claimed her filial piety, wasn't sincere, but just a reason to absolve guilt, she deliberately showed anger, shouting, "If it weren't for avenging my father, why would I take such a big risk?" After killing Sun Chuanfang, when Sun's son lamented the tragedy of losing his father, Shi Jianqiao protested, saying, "His father died tragically, but he doesn't consider that my father died at his father's hands, which is thousands of times worse." Besides using her performance time in court, outside court, she wasn't idle either. Throughout the trial and appeal process, she held several press conferences, gave multiple media interviews, constantly trying to explain that her motives were virtuous and emphasize her righteousness. Since the Shi family played the emotional card, Sun's lawyers formulated their trial strategy, emphasizing rationality. Their strategy had three main points. First, they pointed out that Shi Jianqiao's father, Shi Jianqiao's death wasn't Sun Chuanfang's fault, but part of wartime casualties. Therefore, it cannot justify revenge. If we follow Shi Jianqiao's logic, then all relatives of those killed in war would have the right to take private revenge for the deceased. Second, modern law shouldn't treat voluntary surrender as a special condition for leniency in murder cases. Third, and most crucially, they urged people to follow the facts and legal rulings of the case rather than being swayed by public opinion. They argued that if justice is controlled by public emotion, national law becomes weak and gradually erodes social peace. In summary, the prosecution focused on emphasizing legal rigor and objectivity, aiming to prevent public and judges from being swayed by Shi Jianqiao's emotional appeals, thus ensuring she'd be punished by law. So, how did the court respond to the differing strategies of both defense and prosecution? Ultimately, the judge ruled that Shi Jianqiao's voluntary surrender could be grounds for leniency. While filial revenge deserved moral sympathy, it couldn't influence the court's verdict. Extrajudicial revenge actions were even more intolerable. Shi Jianqiao's 10-year sentence represented the elite view advocating judicial independence and opposing public interference. The case was later appealed to Hebei High Court, which accepted the defense's second argument. Shi Kongbin hadn't received fair legal judgment before death. Based on this, leniency was warranted, so Shi Jianqiao's sentence was reduced to 7 years. Nanjing's Supreme Court also endorsed this ruling. In a way, while not directly addressing public sympathy, the court adopted leniency grounds, effectively balancing the case's massive social impact and yielding to public sentiment. All right, that concludes how public sympathy affected the judicial trial in Shi Jianqiao's case. Under modern legal systems, with solid evidence of Shi Jianqiao murder, she couldn't escape conviction based on societal morality. But sentence reduction was possible. There were two grounds for reduction: voluntary surrender and filial revenge. Ultimately, the court had to consider public sentiment, adopting both reasons and yielding to popular will. From Tianjin District Court to Nanjing Supreme Court, Shi Jianqiao received reduced sentencing. Oh, things seemed to settle down, but surprisingly, the executive branch of the national government took an interest in Shi Jianqiao's case. They believe the state has the right to pardon prisoners who've already been legally pardoned. Through a vote, the national government granted a national pardon, exempting Shi Jianqiao from punishment. So, why did the national government suddenly intervene in this matter? As the government representing state power, why would they support violent revenge like this? This is exactly the third part of what this book discusses. The national government's decision to pardon Shi Jianqiao had two aspects of consideration. First, according to the book's author, Lin Yuqing, the national government issued the pardon to consolidate central control over the North China situation, a very pragmatic political move. As we know, in the 1930s, Shortly after the warlord conflicts ended, the KMT government unified the country, but many political forces still threatened state power. For example, political figures from the old Bang regime included people like Sun Chuanfang. He graduated early from the Japanese military academy and had deep ties with Japan. Thus, old beyond figures found a place to exert their influence again. So even if Sun Chuanfang and others didn't actively betray the country, they got dragged back into the political whirlpool. Against this backdrop, although Shi Jianqiao strenuously avoided politics, talking only about her assassination as personal revenge, she was still seen as a political hero. She assassinated a being warlord, eliminating a potential traitor and indirectly striking at Japanese invaders, actually helping the national government. Secondly, the Kuomintang government granting the pardon was aimed at winning over the people, an ideological play to harness public sentiment. Pardoning Shi Jianqiao was meant to signal that state power stands with the common people. Legitimacy is key here, because in the 1930s, the national government cracked down on leftists and compromised with Japan, plus internal factions. Its image had hit rock bottom. It can be said that back then, anything reasonable was almost contrary to what this government did. Society was full of demoralizing stuff. The government needed a positive image to turn the tide. And in this case, the emotions, Shi Jianqiao embodied were seen as representing Chinese character, with the avenger enjoying broad public support. For politicians, gaining the support of these avengers is like winning over the masses. Therefore, the national government also aimed to rally nationalistic sentiment through this case, showing citizens that brave avengers upholding justice are state promoted. In the ensuing anti-Japanese war, Shi Jianqiao, as one of the few positive figures aligned with the national government, often appeared at war mobilization rallies. Her heroic image of fearing no evil forces and sacrificing for righteousness did spark strong nationalism and serve propaganda purposes. According to records, Shi Jianqiao was released from prison on October 21st, 1936. She first returned to her Tianjin home, visited her mother, then went to Beijing and Nanjing to thank those who helped her, especially the Kuomintang elders who pardoned her. After that, she quickly faded from media and lived a simple, quiet life before the war. In 1937, when the war broke out, Shi Jianqiao migrated inland with the national government, joining many relief efforts along the way. General Zhang Zhizong appointed her as director of the comfort group for the Hunan Provincial Anti-Enemy Support Association in Changsha. In 1941, Shi Jianqiao used her influence in Chongqing and Hechuan to call for public donations to build China's air force. And so this peculiar revenge case in special historical circumstances fermented into the most unexpected outcome. So, all right, that's the interpretation of the revenge case of Shi Jianqiao for you. The listening notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.